Hi, Dr. Tallamy.
Hello, how are you?
I am great. How are you?
Hanging in there.
Well, bless your heart. Well, we just can't thank you enough for this. It's it's honestly the biggest event we've ever had, and so we're thrilled. And we have no idea how we're going to handle the chat box with this many people. Look how happy I am right now.
I was gonna wear it, but it's too hot.
Look, you and Allie
Oh, good.
match.
Everybody's got one.
Oh,
Yes.
I love it.
Thank you very much. This is gonna keep me warm next winter. That's for
I,
sure.
do me a favor, y'all hold those shirts up again. Let me get a. People make fun of me for taking a picture of the screen. They say I can just do a screenshot, but I like taking a picture. It makes me feel like we're really there. Oh, that makes me happy. Look at that. Perfect. Thank you very much. Dr. Tallamy, I want you and Allie to meet each other officially. Allie is a 2018 graduate of Emory Henry, and she's working at the Blue Ridge Discovery Center, and she's helping with the chat box tonight because we've had almost 300 people register for this, and so it's going to be a chat palooza, and so she's agreed to help me kind of try to keep this straight.
Okay, sounds good.
Good. Well, thank you very much. I thought I would. We're gonna just do a couple of real quick introductions and housekeeping things at the very beginning. But then I thought I might just, if you're willing, just ask you to kind of give your elevator speech at the beginning, just to kind of kick us off, and then we'll go from there. I'm
Okay.
guessing. I'm
I guess I
guessing.
better make up an elevator speech, huh?
I just assume since we tell all of our students to make sure they have one, I just.
No, I know. Yeah, but mine tend to turn into books. So there.
Well, and we're not arguing with that because we have quite the collection of just those very
There
things.
you go.
So
Yeah,
you
yeah.
just keep on making those books. That's just fine with us.
All right, I'll ramble for a few minutes and you can cut me off. But
I doubt that I'll cut you off, but you ramble as long as you want to. But yeah, we'll start out asking some questions and then we'll go from there. But I figure with this many folks coming, we'll have no trouble coming up with questions. So I think it's going to be just fine.
I think you're right.
Yeah. The webinar with the Smithsonian article, by the way, is fantastic. And we've sent everybody the link to that so that if they had not seen that ahead of time, that was certainly the perfect precursor to this time together. So.
Well, good.
And let me see, I'm gonna, Allie, I'm gonna make you and Dr. Hainsworth co-host just in case I get hit with a meteorite. You never know how that's gonna go.
Oh dear.
Well, you just can't be too sure in this world.
I guess.
Also, Dr. Tallamy, we're doing our Master Naturalist training online, and I laughed and said, we did not have to have a bad weather plan, but we should have had a bad internet plan because one of the first classes that dropped, and I was like, I never even thought about that. So trying to be more thoughtful about assigning some co-hosts just in case.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
So are you at home, I assume, sir?
I am. I'm in my Zoom room. Yeah, I have not traveled to give a talk since March 11th of last year.
My goodness. And yet
Not
it seems
this
like,
year, but last year.
Isn't that, it's amazing how that we're talking about it, this being a year later, isn't it?
Yeah. But at the same time, I've talked to a whole lot more people than I would have if I'd been on the road.
Right.
These Zooms get big. I did a couple in Ohio that had 2,200 people on them. I would have needed a stadium if I did that in person, and it wouldn't have happened. So.
Well, yes, we have jokingly called that the silver linings or the COVID blessings, because same thing. We've certainly never hosted an event this big for anything we've done either, and I think as crazy as this time has been, it's also given us some opportunities that we never would have had before. So, not going to let that gift horse in the mouth.
I can talk to California as easily as I can talk to my neighbor, and I have. So, but people are, they want in-person things again. So I will do some, but I'm not gonna travel 4 or 5 days a week like I was doing before. I'm just getting too old for that. You're spending your life in an airport or in a car, and that's, not when there's this alternative.
Well, and I think that's kind of my thinking too, is that now that we've learned this, just how, I mean, are we just going to just forget that we learned to do this? I mean,
Yeah.
are we
I
just
mean,
going to act like it made sense before? Because it didn't.
you can tell, the extroverts who just want to be with people, want to get back in person as much as possible. But, I want to get the message out, which is a lot more than having a social event.
Right.
So a social event's one thing, and I'll do them once in a while, but I'm not going to do them every day. So.
Well, good for you. Well, and I hope, and is it fair to say that this perhaps has given you a chance to further your mission a little bit because you've been able to reach more people?
Yeah, I think so. It is fair to say. And I've been able to, before I would always get emails. I hope you're enjoying your yard and your garden. I'd say, I'm never here. I'm never in my yard and garden. What do you mean? But this year I did get to. I was here the whole year.
Wow.
So
Well,
that was
good for
nice.
you. Good for you. Well, did you notice anything new this year since you got to be home more? Any
Oh,
surprises?
we're always finding new species. Let me think of an example. I'm trying to record all the moth species that we have on our property
Right.
that have come because of the plants we put in, and I'm up to 1,049, and I think I added probably 300 this year.
Wow.
So those are new.
That is crazy.
That's exciting to me. I know it's not exciting to a lot of people, but they're the basis of the food web. The more you bring here, the more birds you have, the more everything you have. So it's a good measure of your biodiversity.
Well, I got tickled. There's a church in the community that has a sign up about ugly caterpillars turning into butterflies. And I wanted to pull over and go, well, those caterpillars aren't actually ugly. Can we just
Yeah,
talk
they're not
about
ugly
that?
either. That's right. Yeah. Yeah. These cultural perceptions.
Yeah. And ugly is a harsh word. It is a harsh word.
It is a harsh word.
Oh, let's see.
So what's your weather like?
It's kind of cold today. I don't want to complain because I'm not really ready to be, hot or anything, but it's a little chilly. I've had to drag coats back out a little bit today. We had rain earlier, and it's just been a little cold today. Allie, were you up on the mountain today? I guess it was probably cold there.
Yeah, it was only supposed to rain for part of the day, but it ended up pretty much raining all day, and it was much more chilly today than the last couple of days.
Yeah.
All
What
right.
mountain were you up on?
We're at the foot of White Top Mountain, the second highest peak in Virginia.
Huh, White Top Mountain. I know Old Rag.
Yeah, it's a little north of us.
Yeah, I don't know White Top. And what's the one down near what is it? Hungry Mother State Park?
Yeah. Well, we also have Mount Rogers right up the river.
That's what I'm thinking of. Mount Rogers. Yeah.
We're over near there as well. So pretty much those mountains. Yeah.
That's sweet that you know about Hungry Mother, though. That makes me happy.
Me?
Yeah.
Well, we used to drive around and camp, and when the kids were small, I mean, the East Coast was where it was. So
Sweet.
And in the spring, you'd always head south. You wouldn't head north. So
yeah, that's where you want to be for sure. More dragonflies and that sort of thing after all.
it was just warmer. That's all. We always pushed it. The leaves weren't even out yet. We pushed spring by going south. So
that's awesome. Well, so is camping one of the things that you will do to get out a little bit more as things kind of open up?
In theory, but I've gone to the other extreme now because I've got so many webinars scheduled. We're looking at the calendar and there's no place we can go unless I stop and give a webinar every 10 minutes, So what kind of camping is that? Well, we got to find a hotel with good Wi-Fi, and we've got kids in Portland, Oregon, and and grandkids. So
Yeah.
trying to find a time where we could do a road trip and go see them. And it's not going to happen this summer because I think the most days I go without a webinar is 3. And you don't drive across the country in 3 days. So,
Well, that does feel kind of grueling. I mean, I know I heard you say in the Smithsonian webinar that this is kind of your mission, your life's work right now, but that is a lot.
yeah, it's gotten out of hand. So the last couple of weeks have been 8 a week, gotten out of hand. But when we set them up, it's not 8 a week, it's an open calendar, and then it kind of fills in. And so.
Well, it makes me wish I'd sent you more than just a sweatshirt.
No, the sweatshirt is just fine. No, I have to get better at time management and saying no and things like that. Problem is that there's this, but there's also the real job.
That's true. Well, is the university supportive of what you're doing?
Depends on which level you're talking about. The administration, the upper administration is, because anytime I open my mouth, somebody hears the University of Delaware.
Yeah.
But it's hard on the department because particularly the department now we're doing most things from home anyway. But when I was traveling all over the place, I'm not sitting on committees and, kind of absent. We're not very big. So,
How many students do you have?
the whole university,
Mm-hmm.
we've got 15,000, but our department's not very big. We only have 11 faculty members.
Yeah.
And everybody's got to pitch in.
Yeah.
So it's, it's a mixed bag.
Well, as far as we're concerned, it's a good reason to miss a committee.
That, I think about retirement, and that is one thing I will not miss.
Committees.
Committees, but the university runs on committees, and everybody's got to do it. And so the people that get stuck with it. Well, I'm off having a banquet someplace. That's a hard sell. Yeah.
Well, speaking of someone who understands that, let me also introduce you to Dr. Laura Hainsworth from our environmental studies faculty. She's going to sort of bring an official greeting tonight from the college, and so wanted you all to know each other as well. I feel like you all probably sing from the same hymnal, and so I feel like you all should know each other.
Well, thank you. Yes, it's really nice to meet you, and we're thrilled to have you here this evening.
Well, thank you. You shouldn't say that till the end of it. See how thrilled you really were.
It's a lot of pressure to put on you at this point, isn't
it? Yeah. Now I hear that all the time. We're so excited. I'm saying, it's just me. There's nothing exciting about this, but Cindy says, don't say that,
Well, thank goodness you've got a cheerleader in the house. I think that's nice. Kind of keep your good attitude going. Tell her we appreciate that.
Very supportive, very supportive. Just want to keep it real, that's all.
Well, I think that probably hanging out with caterpillars would keep it fairly real. Fairly.
Keeps it strange anyway.
We'll plan to go ahead and start at pretty much straight up 7, maybe 7:01. I like to give just a second for extra folks, but since we're recording tonight, and thanks for letting us do that. We've had several email me just today to say that they had a last minute meeting and they were hoping we were going to record it. So we'll start here in just a few seconds and get things rolling. So Allie, we'll just play tag team on the chat box as they come in and sort of take turns.
Okay, that sounds great.
All right. You look a lot more efficient with those headphones than I do. I'm gonna have to get me some headphones. You look like you might be launching the space shuttle or something there.
Somebody wanted to record something and they asked me if I had headphones. I said, no, I'll mail you some. I said, okay. Yeah.
Wow, that's nice.
You know Joe Lample?
I don't.
Yeah.
Oh, Allie does.
Yeah.
He's
podcast. Sorry, go ahead.
Podcasts and TV show and stuff. He's the one. He wanted to make sure they had good sound. I said, okay, whatever.
That's great.
That was years ago, but I'm still using them.
All right. Well, it's 7:01, so we'll dive in. And I will say this, but before we actually get started, if I may say to all the folks who are participating tonight, we are recording this event. So if you are in fact part of the witness protection program, we implore you to turn off your cameras and to perhaps change your name to something like Trout Lily, so that you don't get recognized by the feds or the mafia, because we don't want to be part of that terrible event. So we're going to jump in now. Let me just say hello to everyone and introduce myself. My name is Monica Hoyle. I'm the alumni director at Emory and Henry College, and we are thrilled to have you with us tonight. I'm also a proud member of the Holston Rivers chapter of Virginia Master Naturalist, and so this sort of hits two bases for us tonight, and we're excited. We appreciate you being with us tonight for an hour of question and answer with the internationally known entomologist and environmentalist, Dr. Doug Tallamy. And Dr. Tallamy, we appreciate so much you being with us tonight.
Thank you. But you all have to call me Doug from now on.
Oh, good, because it's much easier to say Doug.
Yeah,
so thank you for that. Yeah. Because we're glad to welcome. We have a great crowd tonight, and we're pleased that in this audience tonight is a mixture of Emory and Henry alumni, friends of the Blue Ridge Discovery Center in Colorado, and also Virginia Master Naturalist volunteers from across the Commonwealth of Virginia. And so we're thrilled to have such a wonderfully diverse group in the audience. But because it's being hosted by Emory and Henry, I have asked for someone to give an official welcome on behalf of the college. And the person we've invited is one of our favorite faculty members. Dr. Laura Hainsworth is a member of the Environmental Studies program and director of the Bartlett Crow Field Station. And so Dr. Hainsworth, if you would be willing to say hello to everybody, I'd sure appreciate you.
Well, thank you so much, Monica. On behalf of Emory and Henry, it's my honor and privilege to welcome you all here this evening. At Emory and Henry, we celebrate our place here in the beautiful mountains of Southern Appalachia, and we're proud to play a role in educating future environmental leaders. So for the past 25 years, the Environmental Studies program has introduced students to wonderfully diverse habitats. We've investigated human environmental impacts, and we've encouraged students to seek solutions. So I hope that when travel is easier, you will all get a chance to visit our beautiful campus and visit the Bartlett Crow Field Station. And I'll just finish up by saying how thrilled we are to hear from Dr. Tallamy, Doug, this evening, and to learn more about the absolutely critical roles that native plants play in healthy ecosystems. So thank you all for being with us tonight.
That's awesome. Thank you, Dr. Hainsworth. The last introduction I'll make is Allie Singleton, who is a 2018 graduate of Emory and Henry, and she's going to help me with the chat box tonight. She is on the staff at the Blue Ridge Discovery Center, and I know they're thrilled to have her there. I will say, you all may go ahead and type your questions in any old time you want to. Just feel free to go ahead and put those in there, and we will do our very best in a big crowd, do our very best to get as many of those asked as we can. So you can start typing those anytime you want to, and we will try to get those brought up to Doug's attention. And then finally, I just want to introduce Tallamy, because gosh, you can't believe how cheap he's working for us tonight, and we want to thank him for that. Dr. Tallamy is an entomologist at the University of Delaware and the author of two wonderful books that I think probably most of us have read or at least are familiar with, Nature's Best Hope and Bringing Nature Home. He's the founder of the Homegrown National Park Project, and I'm excited about talking more about that. And he's a man on a mission. And if you had a chance to watch that webinar, you know just how true that is. So Doug, thank you for being with us tonight and taking an evening to answer all of our wacky questions about a really important subject, because I think this is great what you're doing, and we appreciate you sharing with us tonight.
Well, thanks for having me.
Well, I caught you off guard because I said I was going to make you sort of start by giving us your elevator speech. And so you had to come up with an elevator speech.
Okay. Here's
Did you
the
have
elevator
one?
speech that I don't have, but I will. I will just start. You know, I don't have to tell you that we have what we call a biodiversity crisis. The the plants, you don't hear about the plants. They're disappearing just as much as the animals, but the animals are disappearing. And we're having this regular sequence of scary headlines like the insect apocalypse is here, and we've lost 3 billion birds in the last 50 years. And the UN says we're going to lose 1 million species. And the World Wildlife Fund says we've lost 2/3 of our wildlife in the last, since 1970. That's all pretty grim. And it's not something that we really can tolerate. This is not an option because we are part of nature. We're products of it. We're totally dependent on it. And if it disappears, we disappear. Simple as that. You can even take parts of nature. If insects disappear, we disappear. So the good news is that there are those headlines now, because these things have been disappearing for a while and nobody even noticed, or at least nobody cared enough to print it in the New York Times. So the message is out there, and I've been encouraged because people seem to be concerned about it. But at the same time, they feel powerless. You know, the Earth's problems are huge, and what can one person do? So my message is one person can do a lot of things. And I talk about 4 primary things that one person can do. If you own a piece of land, all right, that's a great place to start. You own a little piece of the earth. I mean, it seems crazy to say we own a piece of the earth, but that's what we do. We own the piece of the earth. That means you got to be a good steward of that piece of the earth. And the only way to do that is to take plant choice seriously. Plant choice matters, because if you don't choose the right plants, you have a failed ecosystem. We can talk more about that, but there's 4 things that every landscape has to do. They have to support a viable food web. That's where the right plants come in, because only the powerful native plants that we have in our areas will support the biodiversity that runs the ecosystems we depend on. So we have to choose them. We also have to have a diverse community of pollinators, and not just generalist pollinators. We need all those specialist pollinators too. So we have to have the plants that support them. And they're often different plants from the ones that are supporting the food web. We have to sequester carbon. We got to pull carbon out of the atmosphere and lock it up in plant tissues. But more important, the plant roots pump it into the ground. Our soils are brown or black because of carbon that plant roots have put there. And soil scientists tell us that the Earth's soils can hold, what is it, seven times the amount of carbon that's in the atmosphere right now. So the problem is, how do we get it out of the atmosphere and into the ground? Well, plants do that for us. So that's another thing our properties have to do. And we have to manage our watershed. Everybody lives in a watershed. What's managing the watershed? The plants. So the worst way to do that is to have a yard that's full of lawn, because lawn doesn't do any of those things. So you know, what can one person do? One person can reduce the amount of lawn, can put in the powerful plants, I call them keystone plants, can put in a pollinator garden, can get rid of the invasive plants that are you know, biologically polluting our landscapes, and watch the little ecosystem in your yard come alive. One person can do that, make a difference, become an important cog in the future wheel of conservation. And if you don't own property, you can help somebody who does. You can do all those things for a park or a preserve or a land conservancy. So there's no shortage of work that has to be done. This is a global crisis, but it's got a grassroots solution. And that's why that's the title of the book. You are nature's best hope. And if we do these things, we can turn it around. And I know we can turn around because I've seen people do it. You know, it's happened at our house. It's happened where everybody puts the right plants back, you turn it around. So, you know, when I saw that World Wildlife figure of we've lost 2/3 of the Earth's wildlife, I'm saying not at our house. I think we've increased biodiversity by 2/3, and it didn't take that long. So, so we can turn this around. And that's what I talk about. There's the elevator speech. Go ahead. You can ask me questions now.
No, I think for somebody who didn't have an elevator speech 2 minutes ago, that was pretty darn good.
Well,
I think you may have.
that.
I think you may have sort of hit on what I was going to say was the first question in the box, which is basically, how do you get started? And like, what are the top 3 things you can do to physically get started? And I think you kind of ran through some things, but are those the things that you would say as the very first, you know, you're looking at your yard going, oh, shoot, I've got a whole bunch of grass. What do I do to get started?
You know, it depends on where you live, but in the East here, the easiest thing to do is decide, can I add a tree? And if you add a tree, you've reduced the area of lawn. Can I add 2 trees? Now you've reduced it more. You want to put a bed around every tree that you have in your yard. So that's something that you can do. In other words, the grass should not go right up to the tree. Why is that? Well, we're learning that everything's connected. Caterpillars are the most important part of the terrestrial food web. They're transferring more energy from plants to other animals than any other plant eater. So if you don't have a landscape that has a lot of caterpillars, you've got a dead landscape. So if you put the right plants in that support the caterpillars, you have to allow the caterpillars to complete their development. Most of them, about 94% of them, drop from the tree after they've developed. And then they've got to pupate in the ground. They wiggle beneath the surface of the soil, or they spin a cocoon in the leaf litter under the ground. And if you look out your window at the nearest tree, I bet there is no leaf litter under the ground. And I bet it's grass right up to the trunk. And that means those caterpillars drop down and probably die. So creating a landscape underneath your trees that allows caterpillars to complete their development so they can come out as moths, lay more eggs, and have more caterpillars. Why do we want caterpillars? Because the birds need thousands of them to make babies. One little chickadee needs about 10,000 caterpillars to get their babies to independence. And that bird's 1/3 of an ounce. So if we want birds breeding in our landscapes, you got to have caterpillars. And if we don't have birds breeding in our landscapes, we don't have birds, because our landscapes are everywhere. So I'm rambling. I forget. Oh yeah. So what can one person do? One person can add a tree and start that process. And putting that bed under the tree is the best way to start reducing the area that's in lawn. What you're going for with your lawn is a place to walk. Grass is the perfect thing to walk on without killing that plant. But it should be, Thomas Rayner says, it should be an area rug, not wall-to-wall carpeting. So think of it as these broad swaths of grass that guide you through your landscape, so you can actually do something out there. But you don't have to do it all at once. When I used to go around and give talks, I'd hear people say, "Oh, I'm going to go home and rip out all my lawn." Don't do that, because then you got to do something with the mud you've just created. Just make it a hobby. Reduce it slowly. You can enlarge a flower bed here, put in a tree there. That's how I would start. Having a plan for the entire yard is not a bad idea, but it's not necessary. I mean, if you're going to win a horticultural award, it's necessary, but most of us aren't going for that. So I would just say plant that tree, and plant it small, by the way. The smaller you plant the tree, the healthier it's going to be. It can develop its root system. When you put in a big tree, it's got to be root pruned in order to move it. Everybody wants instant gratification by planting a 15-foot tree, but it's got a 50% chance of dying because so many roots were cut off. And it won't grow. It'll sit there for at least a decade trying to rebuild the roots that were chopped off. So if you plant a seed is the best, but it will grow faster than that 15-foot tree and pass it. And it also will be a lot cheaper. So you get a healthier tree for less money with less effort. You just have to be a little bit more patient, but in the end, it'll go faster than the one you spent a lot of money on.
Awesome. Allie, do you have the next one?
Yeah. So there are some people asking about what specific trees or plants you would recommend to bring in the most biodiversity.
Okay, I call them keystone plants. Remember the Roman arch? The keystone was the stone in the middle of that arch. And if you took the keystone out, the arch fell down. Well, if you take keystone plants out of your local food web, the food web collapses. So, and that's because they're making most of the food. About 5% of our native plants are making 75% of the caterpillar food that drives those food webs. 14% of our native plants are making 90% of the caterpillar food. So without those plants, you have a failed food web. I think of the keystone plants as the 2x4s in the ecological house that you're building. They're going to hold up your house. You can't build a house out of wallpaper. So they're essential, but you're not finished building your house when you just have 2x4s. So you have to have them, but you have to have other plants as well. How do you know what your keystone plants are? You go to the National Wildlife Federation website, and there's a feature of that website called Native Plant Finder, and you put in your zip code and the ranked list of the most important plants in your county will pop up anywhere in the country, wherever you are. So that will give you, that directs you to the genus of plant that's the best. In 84% of the counties in North America, oaks are the best in terms of supporting those caterpillars. In the mid-Atlantic states, they support 557 species of caterpillars, 950 nationwide. There's no other plant genus that comes close to that. So if you have a chance to put an oak on your property, do it. Other really important plants are our native prunus, so things like any of the native cherries, black cherry, pin cherry, American plum, Chickasaw plum. Willows, native willows are ranked way up there. Native birches are good, hickories are good. So it's a continuum, the farther down you go. Maples are good, pines are good. If you want to go for the best, start with an oak, and then you can work your way down. And I know what you're going to say. An oak is too big. I won't live long enough to enjoy it. There are small oaks. Many people with small properties, can't put a big oak in. I get it, but try something like dwarf chinkapin oak or dwarf chestnut oak. Or if you're far enough south, there's a dwarf live oak as well. And so these, if you go to the west, there are oaks that are ground covers. So they come in all sizes, and we should get more of those small ones. There's something called the Georgia oak, which would be appropriate for you people. That is another very small species. They're in and out of the trade. We have to have more of a demand for them so that they're always available. But small oaks are an option.
You mentioned a minute ago that grass is good because you can walk on it and it doesn't kill it. Do you have other suggestions for ground cover that can be used instead of grass that could be sort of tough enough to be trampled on, but a little healthier for the ecosystem?
That's where grass really is superior. Other plants that get trampled on, they just really suffer. I mean, there are a lot of ground covers. Even, Virginia creeper is a good ground cover, but you walk on it enough and it just doesn't hold up very well. We've got a lot of native grasses. I mean, our lawn grasses are cool season European grasses, which means they don't do well in the heat of the summer. Our warm season grasses tend to be bunch grasses, though they're clumpy. So you don't make a lawn out of them. They're great for a meadow, but they're not designed for walking on. So yeah, I really don't have a better option. Regular grass is also what we call a cue for care. A lot of people think if you're going to landscape with native plants, it's got to be wild and messy, and that doesn't fit into our neighborhood culture. Then you get fined and everybody's upset. That's not what we're trying to do here. You can have a lot of plants, add a lot of plants to your property, but if you have a mower's width of grass outlining your beds or next to your sidewalk and your driveway, it formalizes it, and it conveys the message that this is a designed landscape. This is intentional. I haven't moved out. It's not just native landscaping is not the abandonment of landscaping. It's just choosing the plants that are going to support the life around you. So grass is very handy that way as well. And because we're going to have less grass, it's not going to destroy the ecosystem. Right now we've got over 40 million acres of lawn. So if we build that homegrown national park you're talking about, we're going to cut that area in half, and that'll be 20 million acres we get to use. So when we get to 20 million acres, then we'll think about cutting that in half, but we got a ways to go where that happens.
Allie?
All right. So there are a couple questions about tent caterpillars and kind of do their benefits outweigh the destruction that they seem to cause? And if you have any commentary on that.
Yeah, tent caterpillars and fall webworms are two species People get them mixed up all the time. The tent caterpillars are the ones that are out right now in the spring. They make a tent web in the crotch of trees. They're typically on cherries. They really like black cherries, but they'll get on apples as well. And the caterpillars live by day in the tent, and then at night they go out and they eat the leaves. And they're gregarious, so a single female will lay an egg mass, and everybody in that tent is a brother or a sister. They're actually pretty interesting if you watch them. At dusk, scouts will go out. They're specially designated caterpillars that go out and figure out where they're going to eat that night on the tree, and they lay down a silken thread, and then everybody follows that thread up to this area, and then they go back. So if you look at a tree with a lot of tent caterpillars, you can see these highways of threads that guide them up and back. But it's specific ones, the scouts, that go out every night. So I guess they're genetically programmed to be scouts. So if it's a cherry, they often can defoliate it. Does that kill a cherry? Almost never. Almost never. I had a black cherry that seeded in my backyard, and I just never got rid of it. It was defoliated 10 years in a row, and I mean not a leaf on it. Come a month later, you know, I have to take that tree down now. It's too close to the house. It never even slowed down, it seemed to me. So they seem to be adapted to tent caterpillars. Fall webworms come later in the season. There's often, you're going to definitely have 2 generations down there. They form a web over the entire branch that they're going to eat. So it's a much bigger web. You know, it's ugly. It reminds people of spiders because it's all webby, and they're inside. Because of these webs, they're protected from their enemies. So there's a lot of insect parasitoids and wasps and things that can't get to them. That's what controls most caterpillars, are other insects. And they're both hairy caterpillars, so most birds don't like them. Birds don't like hairy caterpillars because the hairs get dislodged in their throat and their stomach. There are 2 birds, though, that specialize in hairy caterpillars, the yellow-bill and black-bill cuckoo, and they can do a good job. Last year, I had 110 tents in my yard. And then one of the cuckoos came. I think it was the yellow-bill cuckoo, but I'm not sure. Maybe it was the black-bill. And a week later, I had 110 empty tents. They just slice it open and they eat every caterpillar that's in there. And then they move on. And this year, I have 0 tents. So, you know, that visit from the cuckoo did me a big favor last year. So for cuckoos, these caterpillars are essential. That's what they specialize on. But they're ugly. People hate ugly. And, you know, my aunt almost burned down Watchung, New Jersey, trying to get rid of tent caterpillars with this torch, you know, and then she dropped it in the middle of the field, and the fire department had to come. People are willing to cut down half the tree to get rid of the tent so that they save the tree. So we need a better relationship with tent caterpillars. In the end, they really don't hurt the tree. Yes, the tent's ugly, and people, you know, you can scrape it down. The adults come out and they fly around as regular moths, and that's what the bats eat at night. That's what, yeah, particularly the bats. I had something else to say. Oh, so the best way to control them is to find the egg mass, which looks like a brown styrofoam barrel that's wrapped around a thin branch, a branch that's thinner than maybe my pinky branch, and it's wrapped around it. And it's there, you know, they come out early. It's right with bud break. And then by June, they have laid their egg mass. It's there all summer long and all winter long. Find those egg masses and just scrape them off. That's the easiest way to control these things. But in the end, ecologically, the benefit far outweighs the cost. In the old days, they only did well in light gaps. So if you had a forest and a tree blew down, that was a light gap, and you'd have 1 or 2 tents there. So they were not common species at all. Of course, what we've done to the landscape now is make everything a light gap. And so they go crazy. So we've given them perfect conditions, and that's why there's so many of them. They're also called an eruptive species, where they outbreak, and they're really numerous a couple of years in a row, and then they kind of disappear for a while, and then they'll come back. And so if you're having a bad outbreak now, they'll disappear on their own, but you can scrape off that egg mass and help them out.
I'm going to kind of squish together two questions because it has to deal with dealing with the neighbors. So I think you approached it a little bit by saying that, you know, it doesn't have to be messy to be good. It can still be landscaping and be pretty and, you know, just with more thoughtful intention. But are there arguments that you have found to be more helpful in convincing the neighbors about not using a lawn service or about planting more natives? And the question I'm going to squish in with that is that a lot of, you know, easy wholesalers like, you know, the stores that we go to get our supplies from don't carry native plants. And so how can we convince them that it behooves everybody for them to make those more readily available to us?
That would be easy if we all got together. You don't buy the non-natives. You go to the nursery, you go to Home Depot, whatever, say, where are your natives? That's what I'm going to buy. You don't have any? Goodbye. If everybody did that, they'd have no market and they'd change overnight. They just want to sell plants, but they have a century of the public not buying any native plants and only buying plants from China. So, and they're still in that mindset. They don't think, you know, the idea that plants are just decorations has driven the market forever. So plants are decorations, and we can still have pretty plants, but they also have vital ecological functions, and that message is starting to spread. There are more and more native plant nurseries that are specializing in them, and regular nurseries are carrying more and more natives too. They're recognizing that it is a business opportunity. So that's what's going to change, and it comes from the marketplace. It's your request and refusal to buy what you're not looking for. Don't say, okay, I'll get the Bradford pear, you know. No more Bradford pears. So we can change the market that way, and it is changing. How do you deal with your neighbors? You have to live with your neighbors. And imagine, put the shoe in the other foot. What if your neighbor came to you and said, you know, you're not living the way I want you to, and I really want you to just be like me? That's a hard sell. So there's a couple ways to reach the neighbors, and that one would be by example. Create a landscape that they really like, and they say, hey, that's neat. And I've heard a lot of examples of that. You know, my kids want to go to your house because you've got all the butterflies, or look at those beautiful flowers, or you create something that's actually attractive and not just a giant lawn. So that's something they can copy. Or you can use a hook. We've got over 70 million people in the country that say they like birds. Most of them feed the birds. You know, they're you know, we get some hardcore birders, but millions of people are casual birders, and they like them. And if you say, look, the plants you put in your yard are bird feeders. If you say almost all of the birds you have in your yard that you like cannot rear their young on seed. So you can put out all the seed you want and they can't reproduce. It's insects that they need. People just don't know that. They don't realize that they've got a landscape in a way that helps those birds that they already like. So that's a hook that I like to use. It's, you know, getting the message across that what we do on our landscape impacts everybody else is a harder sell. So the guy next to you who's using Mosquito Joe and fogging for mosquitoes, that fog goes over and kills your insects too. Does he have the right to do that? No, he doesn't have the right. Is anybody going to keep him from doing that? I mean, that this mosquito fogging all over the country is undoing everything I've been talking about for the last 15 years, and it doesn't work, and it's expensive. So how do you get them to stop doing that? I don't know. That's really, then it gets into contentious, you know, you're really, you're messing me up here. And it's like the neighbor whose one branch goes over onto their side and then they cut it off because it's in their property. That's not the way to get along in a happy way. So I don't preach to my neighbors at all. I you know, maybe I should, but I don't. So what I do is I write books and preach to you guys and hope somebody tells them. Neighbors are hard. That's no doubt about it. But.
I love that. Allie, do you have the next one?
Well, just kind of piggybacking off of that question, specifically, what are your views on cultivars or nativars and how, different those are from native plants versus, are they actually beneficial, basically?
Okay. Now, when you say, what are your views? It sounds like it's my opinion. So I'm not going to talk about my opinion. I'm going to give you scientific fact, and that's what we'll go by. A cultivar is a genetic variant of the straight species, whether it's native or non-native. If it's a native species and you take one particular genetic variant and you propagate that one, and we put a name on it, we call that a cultivar. Some cultivars were found in nature. In other words, they were created in nature, and maybe they had redder leaves in the fall or twice as many flowers. But it was natural selection that created them. And then somebody said, hey, that's great. And they put a name on it and call it a cultivar. But it wasn't actively selected by humans. Other cultivars are actively selected by humans, and they say, we want a shorter plant, so we're going to select for it. But it's a piece of the genotype of the straight species. So the question is that as ecologically productive as the straight species? And the answer is, it depends on what the genetic trait was that was changed. So we did a study. There's actually been very little work on this. We did a study, Annie White at the University of Vermont did her PhD on it. And those are the only two studies I know about. Everybody talks about cultivars, but nobody actually does any research on it. And there are thousands and thousands and thousands of cultivars. So nobody's going to evaluate each one. So what we did was we took 6 common cultivar traits associated with woody plants. What happens when you take a tall plant and make it short? What happens when you take a green leaf and make it red or purple or variegated? What happens when you enhance fruit size, or when you enhance fall color, or you introduce disease resistance? I think those were our 6 traits. And then we grew the straight species and the cultivar in a common garden for 3 years. And what we found is the only cultivar trait that consistently reduced insect use was taking a green leaf and making it red or purple, because you're loading that leaf with anthocyanins, which are it's a chemical that's a feeding deterrent. That's what gives it the red color. So all the red leaf cultivars, like red leaf red bud and your red penstemon, and I mean, there's a lot of them, it's going to ruin that plant in terms of its value as a food source for leaf eaters. So you should know that. The other traits didn't impact leaf feeders at all, or not in any consistent way. Most cultivars do focus on flowers, though. We make an echinacea look like a zinnia. It's fooling with flowers has been kind of like the fashion industry, raising hemlines or dropping them every year. If they don't introduce some new cultivar every year, the idea is that people won't buy new plants. So it's really been about fashion. So what happens when you change a flower? That Annie found that chances that you mess up the relationship between specialist bees and their flower are very good, because specialist bees have specialized on a particular flower with a particular morphology, a particular UV spectrum of color. When we look at flowers, we don't see the UV, but the insects do, and they're all different colors, and they've got guiding pathways to where the pollen is. And if we take a flower and make it a double flower, what you're doing is you're turning the reproductive parts of the flower, the female and male parts of the flower, into petals, which means it's got no nectar and no pollen. So double blood roots and there's a lot of double flowers out there. The native hydrangea arborescens, Annabelle, is a double flower. Nice, big and pretty, but it's absolutely sterile, and it's not delivering anything for the pollinators. So when we fool with flowers, the chances that we are messing up pollination relationships increase drastically. It's not a given though. There is one of those natural cultivars that was found, Phlox paniculatum jenna. It was found in Georgia, I think. It has twice the flowers as the irregular species, and it's got twice the butterflies because of it. So it does depend on what the trait was. What I don't like about cultivars is that they're propagated in order to maintain the trait that we all love. They're propagated clonally almost all the time. That means there's zero genetic variability. And in today's wildly erratic climate, the weather patterns that one day it's freezing, the next day it's 80 degrees, and we're really challenging plants with this erratic weather. We need more genetic variability than ever. So purposely loading the landscape with plants with no genetic variability, we just know that's not a good idea. You get a disease that comes along and can deal with that genotype, it'll take them all out right away because there's no genetic defense against it. So I would like to see, it's simply getting, again, the message to the horticultural tray, go to your nursery and say, I want to buy Acer rubrum, red maple, straight species. Oh, we don't have that. Goodbye. I will go to somebody who does that. Or can you get it for me? And if they hear that enough, they'll get it. Believe me, they just want to sell plants. There's no secret relationship between Chinese cultivars and our nurserymen. They just want to sell plants, but they're convinced that you only want the prettiest plants or the plants that are different from last year. So I'd rather see stray species sold right along with those cultivars and let the market work it out. But right now, in most cases, you don't have the choice, and I don't think that's good.
Speaking of trees, let's talk about trees that either have been cut or have fallen. Do stumps have a value in your tiny habitat? And so is it better to leave it or instead of grinding it out? And if you have a tree that falls, is it also helpful, or should you get that thing out of there?
Again, you got to follow the cultural norms. If you have a tree that falls in your front yard and you leave it as a log that's down there, people are probably going to complain about that. Ecologically, it's great. It's called coarse woody debris. It's under that tree that the salamander lives. That tree is going to house a colony of carpenter ants, and the pileated woodpecker will come and pound it apart and eat them. There are a lot of things that depend on coarse woody debris. And when we clean up the woods or our yards to the point where there is no coarse woody debris, a lot of things suffer. And that includes many of our bees that nest in wood. They tunnel right into those down trees or limbs, and that's where they nest. So again, when you throw that out, you're taking away a very important resource. If you have the chance to keep a snag where the log hasn't fallen down, so let's say you have a big oak in the back and it dies, and if it fell, it won't hit your house. It can stand there. It can stand there for 80 years before it falls. And in the meantime, it is a home for a lot of creatures. There are, I forget my figure, like 84 species of birds in North America that are tree hole nesters that breed in snags. And those are always in short supply, particularly in our managed landscapes. So if you ever have the chance to keep the snag or a decent sized stump, please do it. I know in Texas, what they're doing with a lot of the tall loblolly pines that they grew up in a forest and then they build the houses all around them. You got these real tall isolated trees there's a threat for them to fall on the house. So what they're doing is cutting them off maybe 15 feet up. So it's a tall stump. And right away, the red-headed, brown-headed nuthatches start to carve little holes and they nest in there. So what they're doing is putting in a birdhouse. It's a big birdhouse, and it'll last for decades. And it's becoming standard. People are doing it all over the place. So they're not seeing it as an eyesore anymore. They know exactly what it's for. And we don't seem to do that in the East, but we could do that. I have seen chickadees nest in a stump that's only 2 feet high. when it gets rotten enough, they hollow it out and they go straight in. I've always been surprised when I've seen that, but they will do it. So if you can leave your stump, it's a resource for a lot of things.
Allie?
I have a pretty specific question from Rachel. She was talking about having a butterfly bush in her yard, which seems to be her most popular plant amongst pollinators, even though she has ironweed and she's been planting other sorts of natives. But she said in a recent talk, someone said having a butterfly bush is like having junk food for pollinators with no nutritional value. But then another native gardener said nectar is nectar. So basically, do you have any sort of insight as to whether or not there's actual nutritional value, or whether or not she should keep the butterfly bush or get rid of it?
And even worse, they attribute that junk food statement to me. I never said that. But a newspaper person who interviewed me more than a decade ago did say it. Oh, it's junk food. Quoting me, I didn't say that. So she's right. Nectar is nectar. That's not exactly right, because there's different amounts of sugar in nectar. They do vary. But butterfly bush is a good nectar plant. It makes a lot of nectar. And that's why a lot of butterflies go there to get the nectar. The problem with butterfly bush, there's two problems. One is it doesn't make any butterflies. So it's not a host plant for any butterflies. Butterflies don't appear, out of thin air. They come from a host plant. If you don't have the host plant, you don't have the butterfly. Yes, they need nectar, but a lot of our native plants, most of our native plants supply all the nectar they need. The bigger problem of butterfly bush is that it is showing all the traits of becoming a serious invasive species, and in many places it is a serious invasive species. We've got grandkids in Oregon, Portland, Oregon, up and down the railroads. All the disturbed, uninhabited places are just solid butterfly bush that it has invaded. There are entire Hawaiian islands that are solid butterfly bush. There's a big restoration in New Jersey that used to be the Palmerton zinc mines. They've got two serious invasive problems, butterfly bush and ailanthus. When it's invasive in one place, it's going to be invasive all the places. I pulled them out of my yard and I didn't plant them there. So the lag time that often precedes something becoming a serious invasive is just about up for butterfly bush. And that, to me, that's more serious problem. When you push out a native plant that is a host plant for the caterpillars, the butterflies, and the moths, and replace it with something that isn't, you've seriously degraded that food web. So those are my two problems with butterfly bush. Butterfly bush sounds like you're really helping the butterflies. And if that's the only thing that's sold, and it is pretty, there's no doubt about it, it's very pretty, that's what people buy. Then everybody's got butterfly bush, and you've got a lot of nectar. Oh, by the way, it's not supplying pollen for any of the pollen specialists either. There are no pollen specialists that can use it. So that 1,300 species of specialist bees in North America, it's got all the nectar that they need, but it doesn't have any pollen. They can't reproduce. So it's not black and white. It's gray, but there are downsides that you should be aware of.
Well, piggybacking on your invasive butterfly bush thing, let's ask. Yeah, I think if you're involved with Virginia Master Naturalist, it just seems like an instinct to just pull up garlic mustard whenever you pass it on the street or anywhere. So is that a good habit? Is that a good hobby? I mean, does it really help to take out those invasive species?
Well, now you're talking about garlic mustard. So all invasive species are not created equal. Let's just talk about garlic mustard first. There's a guy at Cornell, Bern Blossy, who he's had plots studying garlic mustard he's pushing 30 years now, where he's done different treatments of how you control garlic mustard in the plots. And you know which treatment after these 30 years, or maybe it's only 25 years, which treatment has the least garlic mustard? Is the one where he did nothing. The one that has the most garlic mustard is the one where it's pulled out regularly. So those are the results of his long-term study, and it's worth thinking about. Every time you pull a garlic mustard up, you're disturbing the soil again, and that exposes a new seed bed. And weeding it out so that you get rid of all the seeds in the seed bed is apparently it's just about impossible. They make too many seeds, and you're never going to do that. So it can make you feel good by pulling it out, but according to Byrne, it's not going to get rid of your garlic mustard. Doing nothing and minimizing disturbance will eventually get rid of it. So there's that. But is it worth controlling invasive species? Absolutely, it is. I mean, look at privet. Look at bush honeysuckle that covers entire states. That it is ecologically castrated the understory of all of those. It's really millions of acres. And I've heard the honeybee people say, well, we like privet because it's great for the honeybee. It's great for the honeybee, one species, for a week. The other 51 weeks of the year, it's great for nothing. Whereas, and by the way, which is bad for honeybees, because honeybees need forage all the time. So when you allow privet to replace a diversity of plants that bloom in a sequence over the year, you're not helping the honeybees at all. And that's the problem with these invasive plants. They create these monocultures and decimate the diversity of plants that do all kinds of things, not just help the caterpillars, they help the specialist bees. It's not helping the ecosystem, believe me. And in most, quote, natural areas, about 30% of the plants are now plants from invasive species from Asia. So can we control them? Yes, we can. Is it a lot of work? Absolutely. But, you know, we've got 10 acres here, and my wife, Cindy, has almost single-handedly, I have helped a little bit, but not much, controlled the invasives on our 10 acres. And it was solid, believe me. So it can be done. She's actually outside right now pulling Oriental bittersweet. So, you know, you got to stay after it. But why do you have to stay after it? We're surrounded by people that haven't controlled them. So there's this steady rain of seeds of Bradford pear and Oriental bittersweet and autumn olive and Japanese honeysuckle. And the others aren't as porcelain berry, terrible. Stilt grass. If everybody got rid of the invasive species on their property, east of the Mississippi, we'd be 85.6% done. And if your goal was to only get rid of the invasives on your property, it doesn't seem so overwhelming. Most people could do that in an afternoon. If you own a lot of property, it's a big job, but you probably have the resources to do it. Then that seed rain would decrease. Then we'd only have to worry about the public properties. But it doesn't make sense to spend any time controlling our invasives when we're selling them in our nurseries. So we just have to get serious about recognizing how ecologically harmful they are. And the worst part is that these plants don't support that food web. We did a study looking at caterpillar diversity and abundance in hedgerows invaded by typical invasives or not invaded. It reduced caterpillar biomass by 96%. So that's taking away 96% of the bird food when you allow these invasives to come in. So is that hurting the birds? I mean, they're not benign. It looks green, but they really are devastating the diversity that's out there. So yes, it is worth doing the best you can to control those invasives. And if you only do it on your property, I'll still be very, very happy.
Doug, as a real fast follow-up to that, I think a lot of people their heads are exploding over the garlic mustard study. So, is there some place we can go to understand this one you do pull and that one you leave alone, or this one you're going to have to cut, or that one you're going to have to put a little something on it, or?
That's the problem. He's done that study with one species. So yeah, you can find those published papers, but has he studied all the species out there and said which ones are good? No. You know what has made our invasives doubly bad though is the overabundance of deer, because they've tipped the competitive balance. The deer like the native plants as much as the insects do, and they won't touch the garlic mustard, and they won't touch the privet, and they won't touch the autumn olive and the bush honeysuckle. So the baby oak pops his head up and the deer takes it and leaves all the rest. So of course you've got nothing but invasives left. So having an overabundance of deer is exacerbating the invasive problem. And that's another thing that Burn Blah City has worked on with exclosures, where you keep the deer out. How competitive are our native plants? And there was a study, it's been a while now, it came out maybe 10 years ago, that I think it pit garlic mustard versus trilliums. And you would think, well, the garlic mustard is going to win easily, but this was inside deer exclosure. So there were no deer at all. And over maybe it was a 5-year period or something, the trilliums won. So when you get rid of the deer that tip the competitive balance, our natives are a lot more competitive than people give them credit for.
Al, you want to go ahead, ask the last question, and then I'm gonna ask Doug to talk about the national park a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask if you have any suggestions on autumn olive as well, because I know that there are a lot of myths about how to get rid of autumn olive and a lot of really aggressive foliar sprays and whatnot, but I didn't know if you had any sort of insight on that.
Well, there's no one way to do it. Whatever you do has to kill the root system. If you don't kill the root system, it will come back. You can kill the root system eventually by simply repeatedly cutting it. But a mowing once a year won't come close. I mean, it'll come back, and each time it'll come back bigger with a bigger root system. By aggressively cutting back to drain all the energy from the roots, and this goes for any invasive plant, you're talking about at least once every 2 weeks. And it probably takes years. So that's a lot of effort. Most people will turn to an herbicide. I don't like to spray because you always hit non-targets. And it takes a lot of material. It's messy, it blows on you and all that stuff. So what I do for a woody is I saw it off at the base, just a handsaw, saw it off at the base, and then paint the trunk with an herbicide, preferably an oil-based herbicide where it will seep down into the roots much better. Roundup is not, glyphosate is not designed for a trunk painting. It's designed as a foliar spray. So I wouldn't use Roundup. People say, well, it didn't work. That's right. It's not designed for that. But that you've done properly, that kills the roots, and then you don't have to do it again. So that's the discouraging part. Autumn olives, it's a tough one because it's a nitrogen fixer. It'll grow anywhere because it fertilizes itself. When we first moved into our property, I had a lot of autumn olive, and I was putting up, in order to keep things that I planted, I had to have a cage around it, or the deer would eat it. Well, I needed stakes for the cages, so I cut down a bunch of autumn olives and I left them. I made stakes out of them and left them on the ground for the whole summer. Then in the fall, I pounded the stakes in to hold up my deer cages. Every one of them rooted after the whole summer. That's how tough they are. So I don't know what that has to do with anything other than don't use autumn olives as stakes.
It sounds like there's going to be a horror movie about autumn olives.
Yeah.
So as we're rounding out our hour here, because I want to be thoughtful of your time, I want you to talk a little bit just about your homegrown national park idea, because I think that is just brilliant and I'm excited about it. And I went and registered today. I haven't gotten much farther than that, but tell us about that and about how we can participate in that. Oh, and maybe as a last thing, also tell us your top 3 favorite native plants, just your top 3 plants. Because you got to have some
Yeah,
faves.
okay. All right, homegrown national park. At least a decade ago. When I got interested in these things, you start to read about it and you come across statistics that make an impact. And one of the statistics that made an impact on me is the number of acres we had in lawn. And in 2005, a study came out and said, you got 40 million acres of lawn, which is the size of New England. So I said, well, gee, that's too many. Lawn's a deadscape. What if we cut the area of lawn in half? That would give us 20 million acres that we could create a new park with. And if we do this at home, we could call it Homegrown National Park. So I remember having that idea, and then I started talking about it in my talks. But and then I added up how much 20 million acres was by adding the big parks together, Yosemite and Yellowstone and Denali and the Adirondacks and the Great Smoky Mountains, and all these parks added up, they're all still less than 20 million acres combined. So this homegrown national park would be the biggest park in the country. Oh, that sounds good. And so I talked about it. And then finally in Nature's Best Hope, I actually wrote a chapter about it. You know, if we all did this, we could create homegrown national park. Well, I gave a talk someplace 2 years ago, and there was a woman who, she was essentially a marketer from Manhattan, knew nothing about plants. I don't know what she was doing there at all, but she came up to me afterwards and she said, you know, you really have to get this message out beyond the choir. Everybody that goes to your talks is already in the choir. I said, I know, I've been doing that for 10 years. It's all the same people. She said, let me help you do that. And I've heard this before. And I said, okay. I said, but I'm not going to do it. I am not a marketer. I don't have time to do it. And she said, you know, this is what I do. We'll create a website. And I said, oh boy, you know. Anyway, we created a website, homegrownnationalpark.org. And right away, she's taken over doing all these things. She hired a web designer. I said, wait a minute, who's going to pay this web designer? So she's hired all kinds of people with no income, but we've got a website. And she keeps saying, oh, the money will come. I said, good. Her idea was to create a map. We're going to get on the map of the US, and you can put in your information and your little area. So it's where you live and the amount of lawn you're going to take out of lawn and plant native plants, or you already have taken out, or you're going to protect in one way or another. So you put that information in there, then your area in your county is going to light up with a firefly, and everybody can see people joining in, and it'll be this you know, social, what do we call it? Social, not social distancing.
Social experiment.
Yeah, well, you know, so it's like social media that encourages people to do it just because everybody else is doing it. You know, I want to be like my neighbor. I'm going to get on the map. We're all going to get on the map, and you know, it seems to be working. We've got over 7,000 people who have signed up to be on the map, and their little fireflies are there. We're working towards the 20 million acres. We've got about 1% of that, but it's young. It's only been up there for, you know, 3 or 4 months at this point. We do have to resolve the financial issues because it can't go unfunded forever. But she's working on that. She said, we're now an official 501(c), so people can make donations and get tax write-off. But you know, there have been issues with Audubon and National Wildlife Federation saying, you know, we don't want to compete with you, and so we're not. There's no admission fee. We don't have members that are paying anything to us. It's a matter of spreading the knowledge that we all need to do this. You know, this is a biodiversity crisis with a grassroots solution. We all need to do this. And once you decide you're going to do it and get on the map, then you can go join these other organizations that will actually help you do it. So, you know, we pull them in, then push them out. That's the reasoning behind it. So it's kind of like a clearinghouse, not a competition with any other organization. She explains it much better than I do.
Well, I'm just excited that you've got a partner in that, because you're right. It's a different part of your brain to do that sort of thing. But I think it's oh good. Allie's put it in there. Allie has put a link to Homegrown National Park in the chat box for everybody if you'd like to see it. And we hope you'll check it out and be a part of this revolution, this social revolution. Somebody came up with the right word. It's a social revolution.
Good. That's good. That's good. Yeah. Well, you know, it puts us all in the same tribe. We're a tribal species. We're all in the same tribe with everybody else on the planet. It's one big tribe, but we've got a big goal. So we need to get to work.
You're a man with a mission, and we would like to be part of your mission. And so thank you for
that make me very
all of us.
happy. Yeah.
Doug, this has been terrific, and I thank you so much, and we thank all of you all for asking such great questions. This was great. What a super hour to spend together. Tell us as we finish up here. Just do you have like a last parting word? Whether it's the one thing we should start doing tomorrow morning, or, the one thing we should say to our neighbors, or just tell us, give us some parting shots to end our evening together.
I guess tonight's parting shot, I do get asked this, and I always have a different one, is I hope you're starting to look at the world differently. When you drive down the street, look at it and say, is that the ecosystem I want it to be? Is that what it ought to be? Recognize that green is not always good. If they're all invasive plants, how can we change that? What's in my yard? What can I do to move us in the right direction? If you can come away with that new view of life, that would make me happy.
Oh, and several people are reminding me that I didn't hold you to giving us your top 3. I finally realized why somebody was holding up 3 fingers. Your top 3, your favorite 3 natives. What are your favorite 3 native plants?
Yeah, that's a tough one. The first one's easy. White oak has always been my favorite plant. It's my favorite tree. Still is. But what are the other 2? Gee whiz.
Not butterfly bush?
Not butterfly bush, no. You know what? Every time I find something new, the plant Phacelia? I didn't know it till last year. It's growing all in my front. I didn't even plant it. Well, there's a specialist bee on Phacelia. And now that I learned that, and I've taken pictures of it, and it's growing right there, and I didn't even plant it, that all of a sudden is a really cool plant to me. I like the ground covers. I like wild ginger. I like the things that are hard for us to keep because the deer eat them all the time. So once we get past white oak, I like a lot of things.
I think it's nice that you and the deer have similar taste. I think that's lovely.
Yes.
Well, Doug, thank you so much, really and truly. And everybody, round of digital applause for Doug for being with us tonight. This has been fantastic. We appreciate you so much.
Thanks for the chance.
And tell Cindy that we're so glad that while we were in this comfortable setting, have a nice question time, that she was out there working her head off.
Is that working? It's getting dark now. It's time for her to start coming in.
Allie Singleton, thanks for helping out. Laura Hainsworth, thanks for helping out. And Doug Tallamy, you are the best. And I can't thank you enough for being with us tonight.
Well, thank you.
All right.
Did I get rid of you?
Nope, we're still
there.
here.
You are. All right. Okay.
Thanks everybody for being with us tonight. Thanks for all you're doing to make your corner of the world a better place. And I hope we can work together to be part of this homegrown national park project.
Yes.
All
right. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Doug. Good night.